On today's episode, we're going to walk through the updated Locked On Podcast Network NHL Power Rankings, talk a little bit about the Texas Stars in Cedar Park, and then check in on the overall performances of some of Dallas's newest players. All of this coming up on today's episode of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome to the Locked On Stars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis. It is Thursday, October 21st, and it's a rest day for the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars are getting prepared for their game tomorrow against the Los Angeles Kings. Coming back home from a 4-game road trip. Nice to have the boys back in town. I'm sure that they're glad to be back in town, and I'm glad that you have tuned into Locked On Stars today because we have a great show lined up, a lot of good things to talk about. And whether this is your first time listening or whether you are a recurring listener, I just want to personally say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Subscribe to the podcast, follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts at. You can also subscribe on YouTube as well and get the visual edition of Locked On Stars in case hearing the show just in your ears isn't quite enough. But jumping right into the first segment of today's show, every week the Locked On Stars podcast, all the local hosts that host every single NHL show come together and we submit, our power rankings for the National Hockey League throughout the season. And yesterday on Wednesday, the rankings came out on Twitter. You can find this full list on Twitter throughout the season. Just search, at Locked On Podcasts. And they tweet about all the sports that we cover here at the Locked On Podcast Network, but they also make sure, they tweet out power rankings for the National Hockey League. And this is the most up-to-date version if you're looking visually. And I just kind of want to run through some of these power rankings because, it's very interesting to start out this season here in the NHL. I think, the biggest thing that you look at is the Florida Panthers coming in at the number 1 spot, jumping up 5 spots. They were number 6 at the start of last week, or I guess number 5, moving up to that first place spot after a really, really impressive first week on the ice. And there's some teams on this list that have played 1, maybe 2 games, but Florida has had quite the full slate of games and played some really high quality opponents, got some really big wins, and they're one of 9 teams still in the NHL at the time of recording this that is still unbeaten. And rightfully so, I think Florida belongs at the number 1 spot. They're a very dangerous team. I completely understand, them being put there and why many hosts put them there. Not who I put there, even though I believe I did place them at second personally. But I'll talk about the second place team, the guys that I think were in first, which if you're watching visually, you saw me throw up the graphic a second ago. But Florida, like I said, very dangerous team. Through 3 games, they have 14 goals while only allowing 6 against them. Guys like Anthony Duclair, Sam Bennett, Alexander Barkov, all leading the charge offensively for the Florida Panthers, each, with multiple goals already this season. And they don't seem to be slowing down. Like I've said, they've played some of the best teams in the league, according to early power rankings and according to who's been good the past few seasons. Really solid wins against the Tampa Bay Lightning, as well as the Pittsburgh Penguins. So it's going to be interesting to see who can beat Florida first. And, are they the team to be out east? Only time will tell as time goes on. A lot of good teams out east, but right now Florida is definitely, the cream of the crop. But not too far behind are the Pittsburgh Penguins, coming in second, throwing up the graphic again for those of y'all watching on YouTube. And again, if you're listening on audio, you can go check these out on Twitter, or you can come check out the episode on YouTube later as well. But you see the Pittsburgh Penguins in the second spot, who I personally voted for to be number 1. This was, I voted, and I believe many hosts voted before the Tuesday night game against the Dallas Stars, where they lost in overtime. But I don't think that factored too much into them being number 2 on this list. They did come up a long ways. They were number 10 last week, but they had a really good week. They beat Tampa Bay Lightning soundly. They lost a close game to the Florida Panthers. So, obviously seeing Florida above them makes sense. But they also beat Chicago quite soundly at home, and then, of course, played a really close competitive game against the Dallas Stars. But this is a really good hockey team that can still improve in a lot of ways. Two of their best players in Crosby and Malkin aren't even on the ice yet. Those guys are going to come back and add a whole new dynamic to this team, and they're going to be fantastic to watch. You see Tampa Bay at the number 3 spot. It's interesting seeing Tampa Bay early in the season kind of having a Stanley Cup slump after winning it for the past 2 years. I would say the weight of the world is definitely on their shoulders right now. They need to win some games and they need to dominate some games soon. Otherwise, they're going to continue to move down this list. I will say Pittsburgh and Florida are high-quality opponents, and so I can understand them losing, but it's really just to the degree to which they lost. Getting beat soundly by these two teams. You feel like even the Tampa Bay is going to lose these games, that they should at least be competitive and they should be close games. But that just was not the case. And then even, against the teams that weren't as good, like Detroit, letting Detroit score 6 points on you and then having to go into overtime isn't necessarily a good look, even if it is on the road. You would expect Tampa Bay, a team like them with all the talent that they have, to win that game and to, hold a team like Detroit to maybe less than 6 goals. The Buffalo Sabres, quite the surprise in this young season. Have they played the best, toughest schedule? No. But 3-0 to start is very impressive, moving up a whopping 10 spots from last week. Last week, all the way at the bottom at 32, but now they are the 22nd best team, according to the NHL host across the Locked On Podcast Network. So maybe stripping Jack Eichel of his captaincy was the key to success all this time. But only time will tell if they are legit or if they will soon find themselves back at the bottom of this list after a few weeks. Seeing the Ottawa Senators at 28 reminds me of how sad Sunday's loss really was, how Dallas should have beat them and won and gotten 3 wins to start this road trip. But at least we aren't some of the other teams in the Central Division. Things could certainly be worse. You look at teams like Chicago off to a super brutal start, no wins just yet. Dropping from 19 to 25 after 1 week. Tough loss to Colorado, New Jersey, then Pittsburgh, then the New York Islanders. Just all around tough sledding so far for the Chicago Blackhawks. But hopefully they can bounce back. I've been saying all preseason. I know many other NHL experts and hosts, even out here on the network, have said Chicago could be a sneaky team this year, but maybe this just isn't quite the year that they start to work their way back into playoff contender positioning and looking to be one of the better teams in the division. Nashville also finds themselves kind of at the bottom with the Arizona Coyotes, currently next door neighbors at 32 and 31 respectively, with Arizona being 32 and Nashville being 31. I don't think Nashville will be down there for too much longer. I definitely don't think they're a playoff team this year, but I think they are better than being the 31st best team in the NHL. Just kind of off to a tough start this season. I think they'll find their way a little bit and kind of just fall as a mid-tier team this season, bottom mid-tier team. And Dallas finds themselves 1 spot up from where they were last week at the 15th spot, coming up from the 16th spot after last week, which feels about right. I think especially after Tuesday's win. Had they lost Tuesday, I think they'd be a little lower, and deservingly so. But I think Pittsburgh, the huge win against them goes a little bit of a long ways. You see the Rangers above them, but again, the Rangers did move down. And so Dallas and New York pretty even, as their game was pretty evenly matched when they played on opening night. But all around, super interesting to see how these power rankings are shaping out. Still early in the season, so some of these teams, are maybe in weird spots now. Like you see the Sabres, will they continue to climb or will they soon collapse once they play some legit competition? Or maybe they're an actual contending team. You even look at a team like Vegas with just a small sample size dropping down quite a bit. I think they're much better than the 10th overall team in the league, but just due to sample size and amount of games played, they just kind of had to be moved for guys like the Edmonton Oilers and, the Carolina Hurricanes to move up. So overall, very interesting to see this so far. Going to be fun to keep track of these throughout the season to see what other hosts think of the teams around the NHL. Coming up next, we're going to take a moment and move down to Cedar Park to talk a little bit about the Texas Stars, the Dallas Stars AHL affiliate team, and just kind of see how they're doing early on in their young season and talk about some guys to be on the lookout for as they'll be looking to hopefully move to the NHL level soon. But before we do all that, I want to take a moment and say thank you to BetOnline for sponsoring today's episode. BetOnline is back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus for your first deposit. Just use the promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, postseason baseball, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Moving on to the next segment of today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. I kind of wanted to shift the focus from Dallas, Texas to Cedar Park, Texas, in the Austin area around the capital of the state to talk a little bit about the Texas Stars, the AHL affiliate of your Dallas Stars. Because there's a lot of good things happening down in Cedar Park, a lot of really young, talented players. The Texas Stars have played 2 games so far this season, and they are 1-1 in those games. They played the Iowa Wild, which can you guess who they're affiliated with? A team called the Wild. Of course, they're associated with the Minnesota Wild. Like I said, Dallas goes 1-1 or Texas, excuse me. I'm going to be saying Texas a lot this segment, and if I say Dallas, I mean Texas. And both teams are called the Stars, so this isn't confusing at all. Going to be a good time. But the Texas Stars went 1-1 in their games against the Iowa Wild, losing the first game 2-0, but winning the game, flipping the script in game 2 and winning 3-1. In game 1, the team in the AHL, the Texas Stars, looked eerily similar to their counterparts up north in Dallas and the NHL, not scoring any goals despite having some really good opportunities to score. Just could not find the net, kind of getting shut down. And then, eventually the defense and the goalkeeping and Jake Ottinger eventually kind of giving way for Iowa to score. And Texas had some really good opportunities, including a 5-on-3. So you love to see them capitalize on that, which they did the next game on Sunday against Iowa, where they flipped the script and won 3-1. Jake Ottinger started in goal for both games and has been absolutely electric so far. Early on in the season, he saved 75 of 77 shots throughout both games. So really nice numbers from him. The Stars organization continues to be in excellent hands in terms of the goalkeeping situation for the Stars in general, whether you're talking Anton Hudobin, Braden Holtby, Jake Ottinger, and maybe we'll see Ben Bishop this season. Big old shrug right there. But heaven forbid that Braden Holtby or Anton Hudobin get injured this season or have to miss time for whatever unforeseen reason may arise. But if they do, I have no doubt in my mind that Jake Ottinger can be called up from Cedar Park to come play for the Dallas Stars and put on a show and can play at a high level and go toe-to-toe with any other team's goalie each night. We obviously saw him play last season with the short-staffed Dallas Stars at the NHL level, and he played really well for how young he is. He's still a young guy, still has a lot of growing and development to do as a hockey player. But overall, really liked what I've seen from him so far, both with the Stars last year, with the Texas Stars so far in 2 games. So I think, he'll continue to improve, continue to get better, and maybe we'll see him at the NHL level this season. Maybe not, but I think it's only a matter of time before, guys like Bishop, Holtby, and Hudobin move on, and Jake Ottinger could very well be the number one goalkeeper, number one goalie in Dallas very, very soon. Another guy that's been really impressive so far is Riley Damiani, the 21-year-old stud AHL Rookie of the Year last season, has 2 goals in this young season and continues to prove that he's one of the best up-and-coming prospects in the NHL. Really, really played well in these first 2 games and has just shown to be a really competitive guy and a guy that the Dallas Stars organization likes a lot. Looking, like I said, being the AHL Rookie of the Year last year, looking to build off of that and have another phenomenal season to continue to build his reputation as a great scorer, as a great player all around. Really fun guy to watch. If you're able to see his highlights, you can go check out the Texas Stars YouTube page and you can see highlights there. And they have some great content over there just for the Texas Stars in general, in case you ever want to get your fix on that with your Dallas Stars content that we're getting this season. But so far, Riley Damiani, nice sophomore season so far, off to a really nice start. Nick Camano, another guy that we've seen at the NHL level before, another guy that is playing well right now at the AHL level. He's looked real sharp early on. He has 1 goal through 2 games and has put in some really nice shifts for the Texas Stars. Like I said, a guy that has NHL experience, which is really valuable at the AHL level. A guy that can be a leader on that team, even if he's not necessarily putting up the most numbers. I think he's a guy that just provides nice leadership and just the way he plays and how hard he plays and how committed he is to the team. Really nice start from him so far. Curtis Mckenzie, another guy, has an assist through 2 games and 5 shots on goal. So hopefully he'll be able to connect on a shot soon. Looks like he's going to be a nice offensive threat for the Stars this season, looking to facilitate and looking to shake things up for this team down in Cedar Park. Ryan Shea and Thomas Harley have both played some nice minutes on defense. Nice to see that we have some nice up-and-coming defensemen. I know we got Borgman from Tampa Bay, who's currently playing at the AHL level for the Texas Stars. He played a little bit with Tampa Bay last year, mostly at their AHL level. Played a few games with them at the NHL level. Will be nice to see him continue to develop, having seen him come over from a championship team, championship culture. Nice to have him on the squad. Riley Tufte, another guy who has yet to score this season at the AHL level. But we know that he had a nice preseason with the Stars. Again, similar to some of the other guys, only a matter of time before he starts racking up big numbers. I think he's going to have a nice season for the Texas Stars this season. And Riley Tufte could very well be a guy that we see at the NHL level within the next year or so. I truly believe that he's a really gifted player. Really enjoy watching him play whenever I do get to see him play. And the Texas Stars will be back in action this weekend. They'll play in Arizona against the Tucson Roadrunners, the AHL affiliate of the Arizona Coyotes, on Saturday the 23rd, as well as Sunday the 24th. Should be a fun matchup because Arizona obviously is in a rebuild. So that means they're really leaning heavy on their prospects and leaning heavy on the Tucson Roadrunners. So expect a lot of good players on their team to, come out and play well. But I also expect the Texas Stars to come out and play well. So it should be really fun to see how those games shape up and how the AHL squad down in Cedar Park continues to shape up this season. Coming up next to close the show, we're just going to take a look at some of the newcomers that the Dallas Stars acquired in free agency this offseason and give them kind of a 1 weekend grade overall of how they've done. Obviously, these are not the final, this is my thoughts on these players and I'm never changing them, but just kind of my initial thoughts on these guys early in the season because they've all played some pretty substantial minutes, some more than others, but everyone has played a role to some degree. But before we do that, I want to thank another sponsor of today's video episode of Locked On Stars, and that is Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money with Rock Auto. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every single customer. They have everything that you could possibly need for your car: brake parts, tail lamps, oil, and even new carpet. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. You can write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. To close out today's episode of Locked On Stars, I want to run through some early season evaluations for the new Dallas Stars players that were acquired through free agency this offseason. So Jacob Peterson will not be on this list when I say Stars newcomers or first-time Dallas Stars players. Jacob Peterson has played really well this season, but he will not be getting a grade. I will be talking about Braden Holtby, Michael Raffle, Yani Hockenpaw, Luke Glendening, and Ryan Suter. And be giving them, a grade like they're in school. So on the A to F scale. And Professor Lewis is here and he's ready to give out grades because it's only a week into the season, but I'm ready to talk about how these guys are playing, starting with Ryan Suter. Ryan Suter so far this season has a B- in my book. Not too bad, but not exceptional either. He is third on the team in time on ice, nearly 23 minutes a game. So to his credit, he has had to step up in a big way, probably sooner than he would have thought, being on a new team and being at his age with John Klingberg going down in Game 1 against New York. So Ryan Suter, his role as a veteran defender becomes more and more important with a guy like Klingberg out. So to his credit, he has done well in that regard of playing the third most minutes on the team, being in his upper 30s. So really impressive, and like to see, his willingness to step into that role for the team, even though this is a new team for him. Really kind of the big negative for him is his plus minus, which is at -3, which those numbers will change a lot throughout the season. And this is obviously very early in the season, 4 games in. But basically, he and Alexander Radulov are both tied for worst on the team, plus minus at -3, basically meaning that Dallas is not scoring with Suter on the floor, and they're getting scored on more with Ryan Suter on the floor, as does the plus minus, or he's just on the floor when they're getting scored on. And that's not necessarily what you want to see from a defenseman, especially a guy like Suter who has played at a high level, but obviously, the expectation can't be for him to put up, the best numbers of his career in his mid to late 30s. So, of course, early in the season, he still has a lot of time left with this team, signing a 4-year deal. Minor eye roll there, 4-year deal at like age 36, 37. That's wild. No pun intended, for his former team that he came from. But I don't dislike Ryan Suter. I don't necessarily love him yet. I know, some people weren't very happy with us signing him. Some people were excited. It'll be interesting to see how he continues to play. If he's able to continue to play a lot of games, I think that'll be valuable, because it's valuable to have a guy with his expertise playing the third most minutes on the team. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Luke Glendening, another guy that we acquired this offseason, averaging about 13 minutes of on-ice time. He scored Dallas's lone goal against Boston at the TD Garden, but outside of that, there hasn't been too much to see, which, to his credit, the way that he affects the game will often not necessarily always show up on the stat sheet. It's kind of just the small things and in the details, the way that he plays, that give Luke Glendening credibility on this team. His sample size is small, but hopefully he will get a little bit more minutes, because he's a really valuable guy to have on the ice as a penalty killer. And that's been a point that's been made in almost every single Dallas Stars broadcast this season. As part of the reason that he was brought is the veteran leadership that he can bring to a penalty kill unit, and just has really good effectiveness, really good numbers with penalty kill units in his time in the NHL. He's also fairly effective in the faceoff circle. He wins about 48%, so about half of his faceoffs, which is valuable, contributing to Dallas being one of the better faceoff teams in the NHL. Moving on to Michael Raffle. I'm going to give Michael Raffle a B so far this season. Raffle currently averages about 15 minutes of on-ice time a game. Really solid minutes from him, really solid production. He always seems to have pretty good shifts when he's on the ice. He has 2 goals so far this season and an assist. So really nice point numbers from him early on in this season. Nice veteran presence on the offensive side of the ice. Really good positioning, in front of the net, and always willing to, do what it takes for the offense to find its groove and to be successful on the team. He's also a really great guy to have on the ice for penalty kills and the occasional faceoff. He is 1 for 1 on faceoffs. I saw, looking at stats, that he was 100% on faceoffs, and I was like, whoa, that's so cool. And then I looked, and he's only done 1 faceoff, but he won that faceoff, which is valuable, which is very valuable to the Dallas Stars. So maybe we'll see a little bit more of him in the faceoff circle. Probably not. But I like Michael Raffle so far. He's had a really nice season through the first 4 games, and hopefully he's able to continue to build on that as a nice veteran leader on this team. Next, we have Yani Hockenpaw, another guy that was brought in this season that a lot of guys really liked, and for good reason. I'm giving him a B as well. Similar to Michael Raffle, another guy who has stepped up on the defensive side of the ice with the absence of John Klingberg. Another guy, even though he's been new to this team, has been asked to step into this role to help give good quality minutes as a defenseman on the ice, and he has answered the call. He has 13 hits so far. I believe only Kivi Ranta has more hits recorded at 18. But I like to see Hockenpaw as an enforcer kind of guy. We're missing Jamie Alexiak this season as he's playing in Seattle. And Jamie Alexiak was kind of our enforcer. They called him the big rig, always willing to go hit someone. I like to see Yani Hockenpaw play with a lot of aggression. He has 3 blocked shots. Always has just put in some really nice minutes. He plays fast. He plays hard. He plays with a lot of energy every time he's on the ice. He's been really fun to watch. I think he's going to continue to improve as the season goes on. And be a guy that, Dallas Stars fans come to enjoy watching him play every time he's on the ice for his defensive shifts. And the last guy I want to talk about, the cream of the crop. You guys know this. You guys should have known from the start of this that I'm going to give this guy a good grade. Braden Holtby gets an A. Not quite an A+, because A+ in my eyes is like perfection. Braden Holtby has not been perfect, but he's been pretty dang close. Pretty easy grade to give him, though. He's saved 89 of 94 shots this season. He looks steady. He doesn't seem very easily rattled. He's very good under pressure so far this season, playing, in some pretty high pressure situations, especially in Pittsburgh. in a tied game late into the third period through overtime, winning in the shootout part of the game, coming up big for his team so far. Coach Rick Bowness has nothing but good things to say about him. His teammates have said a lot of good things about him, in press conferences after games. He looks really solid this season. He's been a lot of fun to watch. And it's just nice to see a good redemption story so far, because he's had 2 shaky seasons with Washington and then Vancouver the past 2 years. And I think a lot of people were starting to count him out and say Braden Holtby's washed. Gone are the days of him winning a Vezina trophy. He might not win the Vezina trophy this year. He probably won't. There's a lot of really talented goalies out in the NHL. But he seems to be the guy for Dallas right now. Anton Hudobin in his appearances has looked good. Jake Ottinger looks good at the AHL level. Who knows if we're going to see Ben Bishop again? Again, big shrug on that one. We have no idea. But Braden Holtby, easy A, has played phenomenal. Can't wait to see him continue to play. And hopefully he can deliver a nice performance for the fans on opening night at the American Airlines Center on Friday. That's all we have for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for a preview of the Dallas Stars versus Los Angeles Kings matchup. Going to be super exciting to have fans, a full house back in the American Airlines Center for a regular season game for the first time in what feels like 1,000 years. Really going to be exciting to have that hometown atmosphere for the green and black. Can't wait to watch the guys play. I think they're going to feed off the energy from the hometown fans. So tune in for a preview of tomorrow's game. And thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with host Scott Cullen. Scott can help you win your fantasy hockey leagues. You heard it from me. Scott is the man. He is the expert on all things fantasy hockey. So tune into his show. You can find it for free wherever you get your podcast at. Go win your hockey leagues. Go get Scott's help. He's the man. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. You can follow me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. Be sure to subscribe to the show, follow the show, leave a review if you like what you hear. Thank you so much again for listening to Locked On Stars. I truly appreciate each and every one of you, and we'll see you back here tomorrow for a game day edition of Locked On Stars.